All right, you guys. So at this point, this is Chapter 8, Lecture 2. Chapter 8 is titled Calculation Doses of Oral and Parenteral Liquid Medications. We stopped on practice problems A, but I want you guys, before we move on to practice problems B, again, my disclaimer is that you should have already done your part. You should have already read the chapter, read the lecture notes provided to you, and also reviewed the PowerPoint. So if we're moving further in chapter H, which we are, on page 261 at the very bottom, it talks about calculating parenteral medications in vials and ampules. I want you guys to know that parenteral medications, when calculating the dose is still, the process of calculating the dosage is still the same. The only difference is that because these are parenteral medications, meaning that it comes in an injection form, and the route of administration is either intravenously, which is through the vein, or intramuscular, which is into the muscle, or subcutaneously, which is underneath the skin, or even intradermal, which is underneath the skin. The process of calculating these doses is going to be the same, whether you use a formula method or a ratio proportion method, but the difference is, your label instructions for the patient, and the difference is that instead of using an oral syringe, you're now going to use an injectable syringe. So if you turn to page 263, it shows these different syringes. Figure 8-8 shows you a 1 milliliter syringe. I have an example of a 1 milliliter syringe here on my sheet. Here, this is a 1 milliliter syringe here at the very top. A 1 milliliter syringe is used for TB shots, and sometimes it's used for insulin. But what I want you guys to understand is that if you look at this 1 milliliter syringe at the very top, you will see that this, I don't know if you can see it, but this says 0.1. The next line here is 0.2 milliliters. That's 0.1 milliliters, this is 0.2 milliliters. Well, the next line after there, or between that, is the next whole number. Let me not say line. The next whole number is 0.3 milliliters. The reason why I'm changing that up is because there's going to be increments of, there's lines in between each whole number. You need to know the increments of those lines. So if you look at 0.3 and 0.4, there's 4 lines in between that. Well, the next line up under the 0.3, these are increments of 2, so that would be 2. So the next line under that 0.3, I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to try my very best to point to that line. That is 0.32. Of course, we always add a leading 0. So that next line is 0.32 milliliters. After that is 0.34 milliliters. So it's increments of 2. So there's 4 lines in between each whole number. So the first line is 2, the next line is 4, the next line is 6, the next line is 8. That's 4 lines. Well, the next line is a whole number, so that's the 10th. All right. So again, if you're following me, at that 0.3, the next line is 3.2. After 3.2, we have 0.34 milliliters. After 0.34, you have what? 0.36. Then after that, you have 0.38. After 0.38, you now are at 0.4. All right. So again, a 1 milliliter has increments of 2.2. All right. Turn to page 264. Now, with these syringes, these are not oral syringes, they're injectable syringes, so they come in different sizes. They come in a 1 milliliter, it comes in a 3 milliliter, it comes in a 5 milliliter, it comes in a 10 milliliter, it comes in a 20 milliliter, 30 milliliter, and so on. Alright, so let's look at the 3 milliliter syringe. Well, between each whole number, you have how many lines? Well, I'm going to look between the 2 milliliter. This is 2 milliliter. The next whole number is 2.5 milliliters. So the question is, there are 4 lines in between the 2 and the 2.5. The question is, what increments is that? Well, it has to be 1 because the next whole number after after 2 is 2.5. So that means that the next line under the 2 is 2.1 milliliters. The next line after the 2.1 is 2.2 milliliters. You guys see where I'm going with this? The next line after the 2.2 milliliters is, if I'm drawing, I hope you guys are following, 2.3 milliliters. The next line after the 2.3 milliliters is 2.4 milliliters. And then the next line after the 2.4 is your 2.5. So the increments on a 3 milliliter is what? 0.1. All right, let's keep going down. The next syringe I'm going to select is a 5 milliliter syringe. So if I look at this, a 5 milliliter syringe, in between each whole number, I'm going to draw this out. This is 1 milliliter. This is 2 milliliters. Well, in between each, there's 4 lines there. So the question is, what are the increments of those lines? Well, these are whole numbers with no halves, which means it has to be 0.2 increments. Well, let's just double check to see if I'm right. So the next line under the 1 is 1.2 milliliters. The next line under that 1.2, I'm going to draw here, is 1.4 milliliters. I hope you guys are able to follow. The next line from that 1.4 is what? 1.6 milliliters. The next line from that 1.6 is 1.8 milliliters. And then, of course, my next line is 2. My next line is 2 milliliters. So the increments in between these whole numbers on a 5 milliliter syringe are 0.2. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, and the 10th is the next whole number. All right. Let's look at a 10 milliliter syringe. A 10 milliliter syringe, between the whole numbers, I'm going from 9 to 10 milliliters. I see 4 lines in between each whole number. The whole number is an actual whole number. There's not a half point there. So that means that in between each whole number, the increments is 0.2. All right. So the next whole number under 9 is 9.2 milliliters. The next whole number after that 9.2 is 9.4 milliliters. The next number after that 9.4 is 9.6 milliliters. All right. And then the next line after that 9.6 is 9.8 milliliters. And then, of course, you get to 10. All right. Well, again, In between each whole number, your increments is 2. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8. Next whole number, 10, which is 3. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Of course, you would say 10, but your 10th is what? The next whole number, which is 3. All right? Well, that is very important for you guys to understand, because we're going to be calculating these doses, and we're going to have to show our doses on their syringes. All right? And sometimes with these calculations, you have a lot of points, milliliter, 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, especially when it comes to parenteral medications. And so this is why it's important for you guys to know the increments of each. So let's look at practice problems B. Practice problems B states that they want you to basically, the following problems are designed to help you correctly read a syringe. So they basically want you to read each syringe, all right, and provide that volume. All right. So for number 1, the amount in the syringe is what? Well, it's a 3 milliliter syringe, and that line is actually at the 1.5. So as you can see, it's shaded above the 1.5. So you're going to read that as 1.5 milliliters. Number 1 for practice problems B on page 266 reads 1.5 milliliter. All right. Well, what about number 2? Still on page 266, practice problems B. Number 2 is using a 3 milliliter syringe, and the line is below, is on the second line below the 1.5. That's where that line is. Let me not shade it in right now. Let me just draw the line. It's on the second line after 1.5. All right. So if you have 1.5, remember the increments between the numbers on a 3 milliliter syringe is 1.1. So if I have 1.5 here, 1.5 milliliters here, the first line is 1.6 milliliters, which means that my second line is what? 1.7 milliliters. So for number 2, practice problems B is 1.7 milliliters. As you can see with all of these problems, when you calculate a dose, you are to always use the syringe that is going to provide the supply of medication. It's going to provide that dose. You're never going to use a syringe over that amount, or you're never going to use a syringe below that amount. So because this is a 1.7 milliliter dose, that doesn't mean that you're going to use 2 1 milliliter syringes. You're going to use the next syringe that will occupy the entire volume, which is a 3 milliliter syringe. All right. Skip to number 5. So now, number 5 wants you to indicate a 3.6 milliliter volume. So a 3.6 milliliter volume, technically, your book is using a 10 milliliter, but because you only need 3.6 milliliters, what syringe volume should you be using? If you said a 5 milliliter, you are correct, because the rule of thumb is to use a syringe that will take up that volume. Never use a syringe that's over the volume. So because of that, for number 5, I'm going to use a 5 milliliter syringe. So I'm going to find my 3 milliliters. My 3 milliliters, of course, is here. But I need to go to 3.6 milliliters. So remember, on the 5 milliliter syringe, the lines between each whole number indicates 0.2. So the first line is 3.2, the next line is 3.4, and then of course the next line is 3.6. I'm going to draw my line at 3.6, and then I'm going to shade it in above the line. All right, using a 5 milliliter syringe because a 10 milliliter syringe is entirely too big for this 3.6 volume. All right. All right, number 6 says for us to indicate 0.64 milliliters. So because it's asking for 0.64 milliliters, that means I need to use a what? A 1 milliliter syringe. So the first things first is that you're going to find the 0.6 milliliter dose or volume, let me not say dose, and then you are going to then below that 0.6 you're going to find 0.4 below that, so or 4 below that. So the lines in between each whole number are at what increments? 2s. So the next line is 0.62. The next line after that is 0.64. So I'm going to draw my line there, shade it in. This is 0.64 milliliters. All right. This was number 6. Make sure I put the numbers there for you. All right, number 7 says to indicate 6.8 milliliters. So what size syringe will you use? Well, yes, you're going to use a 10 milliliter syringe. I'm going to go down to my 10 milliliter syringe here. All right. On my 10 milliliter syringe, I'm going to find the whole number 6, which is here. This is 6 milliliter. Now, between each whole number, there are 4 lines there. Each line is 0.2. So the line after the 6 milliliter is 6.2. The next line is 6.4. The next line is 6.6. And then the line above the 7 is 6.8 milliliters. So I'm going to draw my line right there and shade it in above the line. That is 6.8 milliliters. All right. You guys can do the remaining practice problems, questions for practice problems B. All right. And you guys are just basically indicating the volumes for each one. Remember, you are to use a syringe that's going to take up the volume as much as possible. You're never going to use a syringe that is way over that volume or below that volume. All right. If you have any questions or you get stuck on one, please feel free to send me an email, ask me any questions. This is the end of Chapter 8, Lecture 2.